tensions tonight. Tensions
Sure.
in business, tensions in culture, tensions in relationships, tensions within oneself. It's an underdone topic, and so thought we'd bring that to the table tonight. We could go anywhere and everywhere. I'm planning to share a few of the key tensions that I see in corporate environments and with business owners and their businesses, and invite you to do the same and whatever you'd like to throw in. So yeah, let's get going. So Jay, do you want to talk us through this concept of polarities and, maybe binary or
Sure.
either or and continuum thinking?
Yeah, many ways that it can play out. It can play out in in binary thinking and thinking in black and white, either or. It can play out in polarities. It can play out in contradictions, in being asked to do less with more, for example. It can play out, and so the idea is to look at the pros and cons of binary thinking from a context perspective, and what does continuum thinking provide us that binary thinking or polarity based thinking or contradictory based thinking not provide us with.
Yeah, fabulous. Yeah, good start. Okay, so, I like to think about it. I got sort of plain man's English a lot of the time. So, I like to think of binary thinking, like you said, as the black and white, and then continuum thinking as being more the 50 Shades of Grey, not to get into any romantic novels this evening, but the 50 Shades of Grey. That's my metaphor for it.
Sure.
How about we actually just start with an example and just pull it apart a little bit and just throw it around, see where we go.
Sure.
I think one of the big things for corporations at the moment is this polarity, I would say, of sustainability and growth. It's like, I might liken it to be, let's say a meta polarity, like a very big ticket theme that really can have contradictory or polar opposite intentions. So how's that one for you if we pull that apart as an example?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to kick us off?
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, cool. I mean, it's very alive for me because I work with a lot of businesses that are both in the growth phase and really about financial results and, healthy balance sheets, healthy cash flow. And then also a lot of companies that are very invested in the sustainability agenda. And there's very few that are straddling both and doing it well at the moment. And so I think this is a good polarity to unpack. So a lot of companies will start with a mission of sustainability or a purpose of sustainability or environmental friendliness or green contribution, whatever you like to call it. And they're very, their whole reason of existence, their purpose, their missions, their values, they're aligned around sustainability. And, I often see that they actually struggle to really get off the ground and to get financially sound and to be solid in their growth and their venture funding and their scaling, versus, let's say, maybe a more mature, established company that's still on a growth trajectory, but that's perhaps predominantly oriented around the traditional metrics of success, which is, profit, cash flow, dividends, equity, etc. And so there's this dynamic tension at play here. And so that's just a little example of one polarity that's quite commonly on a business owner or an executive's mind. Do you want to take us a bit deeper?
Well, there's another polarity you pointed out, which is the polarity between environmental sustainability and financial sustainability. Is a very common polarity. And there can be a polarity between financial sustainability and then, equality, equity, sustainability of their people, for example. And, we're seeing a lot of backlash to DEI in that side of the polarity. And there's a lot of companies out there who call themselves sustainable who are now jettisoning DEI principles because there's a global movement against those structures that have been put in place because they're seen as too punitive. So even though they were meant to be sustainable, they've become in a lot of cases unsustainable. That's not
Mm.
me. That's not to say they're not right. There's a lot of polarity that exists within organizations. There's a lot of polarities or either ors that exist within us. We can
Hmm.
have either or values contradictions where we know something that we should be doing, but we're doing something else. And we
Hmm.
can have, one value of freedom and
Hmm.
another value of discipline
Hmm.
that operate within us simultaneously. So human beings are walking, talking contradictions.
Well, they
So
are. And then, what comes to mind on that one, Jay, just to cut in for a minute, is I had to share this. It's Jocko Willick. Jocko, he's made himself pretty famous after his tours of duty to Afghanistan and his podcast career now. But he's got this quote: discipline equals freedom. And
right.
maybe that's an attempt to collapse the contradiction of, discipline and freedom, right?
Yeah, maybe linking them together. Let's look at the continuum side. The continuum side is
Mm.
paradox, and I think that's what
Hmm.
that's starting to look at. And
Mm.
paradox is that both things, and well, it's starting to look at it, but it's not actually looking at it. Both things might be opposite, but can exist simultaneously at the same time. So they can be
Mm.
opposing truths and still paradoxically, fit together. You can be in pain and grow simultaneously. So,
Mm.
you could be regressing and developing simultaneously. Both things can happen at the same time. They don't necessarily
Right.
just have to equal each other.
And one may be the cause and effect of the other. So the regression that you experience may lead into the growth, which regresses you in other parts of your being. Yeah, I
Or
really love
or
that.
even more pertinent, the growth can be our regression.
Mm. Yep.
We're seeing that
Yep.
globally at the moment with the
Mm.
culture wars and the growth, the progression being what the earlier stages of development of meaning making are resisting. So the growth becomes the problem. So,
Yeah.
that's another polarity.
Yeah, totally. So let's try and ground that maybe. It's really interesting that like the DEI piece, and not to have a horse in the race on this one, really. I mean, I think there's a lot of merit in the DEI initiatives and
Yeah.
perhaps poorly executed, I would say. And, as a society, we're just trying to get our head around how to do this properly. But, that started 60 years ago, 70 years ago with affirmative action and quotas, and then it evolved in different ways and forms. And, now here we are, we find ourselves with at the point of some people pursuing pure equity, equality of outcome rather
Right.
than equality of opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and justifying it with business cases that show purportedly that there's organizational advantages to pursuing such business cases and organizational transformations. And then, on the other side, there's the backlash that's sort of a little bit philosophical backlash, but also a counter argument that a lot of money's been spent on DEI programs that has basically gone down the tube. And so there's your polarity right there.
Mm.
And there's shades of grey along that polarity. So back to you. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, don't please. Polarity exists even within the singular. So let's look at equity.
Mm.
And the
Mm.
equity movement is a fourth person perspective. In
Mhm.
Ken Wilber's stages of development, a green value. But
Yep.
look at equity. Equity itself says that one truth is no better than another.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
that has been taken by the earlier stages of development and given back to green with, well, if there's no truth, then I can make it up, and
Yeah, I could make it up.
that can be the truth just as much as your truth can be. And
Yeah,
so that's
totally.
where progression has actually backfired on us because because that green stage of development has not thought through the equity part and what it actually means if it's taken literally. If it's
Yeah.
applied
Yeah.
concretely, operationally, it can be like, well, my truth is that these are the economic numbers, these are the performance numbers, that's my truth, even though it's like, well, they're not facts. It's like, well, hold on a sec. You just said no truth is better than another. And so you got this progression paradoxically and binarily can cause and create the opposite effect that it intends. So it can become a
Yeah.
binary in
100%.
and of itself, which is
Well,
another
it's funny,
paradox,
even
right?
yeah, even within that, I mean, to say that, let's say, equity may be the most important aspect of an organization's culture and, you know, modus operandi, let's say, would
Mm.
be to place it in the hierarchy above everything else, which is unequitable in and of itself.
In and of itself, the
And
view of
in and of
equality is
itself.
unequitable in and of itself, right? It starts out with a kind heart. It starts out with a kind
Mm,
principle, right? And it starts out with an equal level of care from which we
mm,
all begin. And so it
mm.
starts out with human rights at the foundation of it, but where it finishes up is inside a hierarchy, which is exactly what it's trying to dismantle.
To
It's trying to
dismantle.
dismantle the hierarchy whilst holding a hierarchy that equity in and of itself is more important than other values. And so what's happened is the world's gone full resistance to that. Hang on, you're
Yeah.
taking away my rights by saying that. By saying that if you don't operate from a value of equity, then where are you? It's unequal. And so,
Right.
organizations, this is the complexity organizations are having to deal with on a daily basis. And you
Mm.
and I have spoken a lot about AI. We can put in this developmental stages complexity. We could put in AI complexity. We can put in complexity of technology. We can add. There is so
Yeah.
much complexity, and so it's from my perspective, it has never been a harder time to lead than now. It's never been a more difficult and
Totally
challenging
right.
time to be a leader today. and
Yeah.
and the embracing of paradox to understand that complexity, from where I sit, is really a necessary component of a human being or a leader's development. Without that, you're going to get caught in binaries day in, day out, and you're going to get it caught in these arguments.
Love that. Love that. And maybe let's talk about why it's so important for executives and business owners today. And I was actually listening to something on YouTube today which made me laugh. And so I'll take us to a different polarity if that's okay. And maybe this polarity might be, let's call it innovation versus stability.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the polarities that we're talking into with AI, right? So there's all
Yep.
this innovation coming down the pipe,
Yep.
and executives are kind of like, well, it's a balance against the stability of where I'm at right now, and how do I generate cash, and how do I keep the old model while I'm transitioning to the new. There's all those conversations going on in boardrooms around the country. And
Yeah.
so it's a really interesting one. And I can't remember whether the company was McDonald's or Taco Bell. And both of them have had incidents with this.
Mm.
But essentially, they went with a heavy emphasis on the innovation. And so they put AI into their drive-throughs, and then of course, what happened? You had a whole bunch of people that were driving through with their cars, and they were ordering a soft serve cone or something, and then the AI agent saying back to them that they'd ordered a cappuccino, and of course, they were filming it on their phone, and from the drivers, there was a whole bunch of expletives coming back at the AI agent, and the AI agent had no idea how to handle it, and it was a complete disaster. And so, Macca's have wound that back now. It was Macca's or Taco Bell. I can't remember which one,
Because it
but
became
they've rolled that
unstable.
because it became unstable. And so they've rolled that back now. And the learning at this point in time was that the paradox of it was that even though we've got all this technology that can theoretically do this right now, people want to talk to people.
Right. They want stability and information. They want
Right.
both of those things.
I want
They
both.
want the innovation to be stable. They want the
Mm.
innovation to stabilize.
Yeah.
And so that they're kind of asking for both to occur at the same time. And we're
Yeah.
not looking at how do we create innovation that facilitates not less stability, but more stability, knowing full well that as we introduce that, we'll create instability before we get to
Mhm.
stability.
Right.
How do we actually think about and how do we actually process that, from an organizational perspective in decision making?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I really love it. I love this polarity as an example because, I always come back to there's a lot of people that say that all the jobs are going to go with AI. And I just sort of shake my head. I don't agree with that point of view. I haven't seen it in history of humankind anywhere before. So there's no map for that to occur. But I look at, for example, Uber, which in theory has got a much better service than, a normal taxi service here in Australia. But yet when I look around the roads, there's still plenty of, 1-3 cabs. And
Yep.
there's still plenty of room for that kind of business model to coexist with the Uber model. And I just look to my mum and dad and I go, they would never order an Uber in their life. They wouldn't know how to. And so, this notion that everyone's going to be replaced with AI, I personally don't buy it at the moment because I
Huh.
think to actually say that is a classic demonstration of binary thinking. It's all or nothing. And usually what we're talking about is somewhere in the middle. The 50 shades of gray is what actually happens. And the best guide to the future is the history.
Yeah. Then we can add to that that the future hasn't happened yet, and paradoxically, we
Right.
create it. So
True.
in essence, it's really up to us whether that occurs or not. And that's the continuum thinking. That is the
Yeah.
paradoxical thinking. And if how we think about AI will track AI's future. So it
Mm.
may indeed take a lot
True.
of our jobs, but it can also evolve in a very different way where it evolves alongside of us and integrates in and with us and our thinking and technology and all the rest of it to include us. So it could go in so many directions. The paradox is
Just
that
actually,
really it's up
can
to
you
how we
pause there?
approach it.
Yeah, I love it. I love that. Like, I want to take you back to what you just said because that just went off in my brain too, just for the first time, just then. A lot of people are saying that, usually what happens with these sort of things is that new jobs are created. And then there's a fair few people at the moment, fair few experts saying, well, we don't see where those jobs are going to come from. But I think what you just said, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's a possibility that's currently I haven't heard anywhere else, which is actually AI, as part of its agency, goes about creating jobs for humans
Oh,
that
wow.
either it can't, either it can't do or it doesn't want to do. Now that's proper polarity thinking right there, if that's what you said.
Right. So you see how we think about it really matters. The
Mm.
level of thinking that we bring to it, and this is where continuum thinking in organizations is going to be the new bullion. It is going
Mm.
to be the
Totally.
new capacity of the organization, the sophistication of the organization that is being, right now, from my perspective, undervalued as we move
Totally.
in a polarity binary based way straight to, AI
Mm.
innovation at the cost of
Mm.
stability.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's go there. If we went there, it would destroy our entire financial system. How is the billions of
Well,
people that
and
exist on the planet going to exist within a financial system where they can't work and
right.
make money?
Well, it'd go beyond that. I mean, it'd destroy the financial system, it'd destroy the political system. And, I think actually in our community, the extended community, the integral community, I think Rob Smith came out and said that, he could see that we'd go back to neo feudalism if those scenarios played out, which basically, is a whole bunch of small warring states where we all become members of a clan again. A very technologically advanced clan, but we go back to clanhood. But anyway, maybe let's not take that red pill tonight.
But it can go in that direction, but it can go in a different direction. And the direction
Right.
that it can also go in, which is really up to us, is that, that we have a different view of how we can form, direct, how we can work with and understand and utilize vice versa for it to understand us, and how we can
Mm.
integrate those systems of both and truths. So we're
Yeah,
not
love that.
just got an either or truth, we've got a more
Mm.
integrated perspective that we're bringing to these problems. And that can only at this point in time occur within a human being who is at a later stage of development, a later stage of continuum thinking.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, great. Let's talk a little more into that because, the natural question is, why is it so rare? And Jay, what do you mean when you talk about either or and both and? Do you want to talk a little more into that?
Well, it's rare because the it's rare because the value system, and it's still a value system, that level of thinking holds, i.e. it values paradox, that value system holds paradoxically is in direct binary to the thinking of earlier stages. And so the later the stage of thinking goes, the more resistance it's creating, because it doesn't have a way of integrating and what Ken Wilber would call transcend include. And what it's doing just before then is transcending and excluding, which is creating more of the problem. And so how do we get more of that thinking? That we start to accept that there are different views, not only within us, but within
Mm-hmm.
each other. And we start to
Mm.
see that there are not one truth, but multiple truths. There are at least four truths that we can apply to anything. And when we get
Yeah.
that sense, then your truth becomes your truth, and it's true from your perspective, but it's also simultaneously, because it's your perspective, partial. And so it's a
Right.
partial, not holistic truth. It's part of a greater truth. For example, like a letter on its own doesn't have any meaning. When it becomes a
Mm.
word, it starts to form a greater level of meaning. As it grows into a sentence, it becomes a greater level of meaning again. And when that sentence becomes a paragraph, it grows as a greater level of meaning. When that paragraph becomes a chapter and a book, and the book becomes a series, and the series becomes a library, now we've got more complexity, and we can hold more information even in that metaphor. And so as we grow complexity, we get access to be able to hold complexity, because we've got more capacity to do so. And so what stops us is, along the way, the book rejects the paragraph and the chapter, and it rejects the word that makes it up.
Right. Gotcha. And I'm going to go a little bit of a different angle, a more simplistic angle on this one. Maybe this is my Stone Age self coming forward, right? I just don't ever recall. I mean, I spent the first 37 years of my life, growing up through a corporate or a set of corporate organizations. And I don't remember once being trained on how to take perspectives or evaluate truths,
Right.
ever.
Yep.
So, you go to a lot of communication training, relationship training, culture building days, yada, yada, yada. I don't remember ever being trained in how to take perspectives. And so I sort of just sit here very simply and say, we have not been trained how to do this properly as humans, by and
Yeah.
large. And so, if I have my data right, there's less than 5% of the planet that can really think in genuine continuity or continuum thinking. Am I right on that data? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was some training, which is a paradox. There was some training, not no training. I mean, you know, my, my
Very
mother,
good. Bum,
my
bum,
mother
bum.
slapped me into seeing other people's perspectives, right? It's
Right.
like
That's
you
true.
selfish little,
That's
you know.
true.
So from first to second person, I was slapped into second person perspective over time. So there was
Right.
some, but not a
I
great
was shouted
deal.
into it.
Yeah, the rest I had to navigate and find myself by ducking the slaps. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you were slapped, I was shouted into it. I love the fact that you've picked up my own binary thinking there. So thank you for serving that back to me.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's a few other ones that I want to throw on the table just so people get a little bit more context around this one. So at an individual level, you've always got this, balance of independence
Mm.
and interdependence. That's a pretty strong polarity to work with in terms of either
Right.
or both and thinking.
Yeah.
And feel free to just say anything as I introduce some of these, Jay. There's also in a lot of businesses, there's family dynamics. So, family versus business. Polarity to be held, seen, and chosen from. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Personal wealth versus company wealth.
Yep.
That's another one. How much money do I take out of the business? How much money do I keep in to grow the business? All those sorts of things are at play.
Sure.
Control and delegation, or control and flow. A big one for leaders. There's a lot of under delegation that I see, and an
Yeah.
over control. So there's a few just for people to work with. Do you want to pick any of those up, or pull on any other threads that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, if we looked at the world of high performance sport, then we have playmaker versus team. We have
Oh,
coach
yeah, yeah.
versus
Yep.
players. Yeah. We have
Yep.
management versus staff. We've got polarities
Mm,
running through every aspect. And then we
mm,
value an individual more than we value the team, and then we wonder why the individual doesn't fit into the team. Lewis Hamilton would be a perfect example of that,
right.
where he struggled
Right.
to integrate into the Ferrari system because his value system is different from their value system. And
Mm,
so there's been, a fantastic performer not be able to integrate fully into a team because the team didn't think about what it would be to integrate this superstar into their system. It was like, you will bend. And he's like, no, well, actually, the car needs to bend to me. And they're like, no, you need to bend to the car. And they got this polarity, right? Because they didn't think it through with continuum thinking would be a great example in high
Beautiful example.
performance
Yeah.
or elite performance.
Maybe they should have considered building a sidecar for him.
That's Formula S.
Yeah, Formula S, right? I'm not terribly familiar with the world of Formula One. Yeah, really great share, really great story. Okay, cool. So we're almost at time. So is there any advice that you'd give for execs or leaders or business owners out there in terms of, okay, you're interested in exploring this polarity space and continuum
Right.
thinking a little more? How would you go about it?
Get some coaching from one of us. Get some coaching from somebody who can see what you can't see. Number one.
Mm,
Number
mm,
two, go read Ken Wilber's An Integral Vision and begin
mm,
to actually engage in the practices that are in the book, because Ken's
mm.
quadrant model is a developmental model. So learning it develops you. And
Yeah.
and and utilize perspectives. Realize that your subjectivity is not objective in the world. It is
Mm,
it is subjectively true, and so you're got a human right to that subjectivity,
mm.
but it's not an objective, factual, rational, logical, measurable, repeatable
Right.
truth, and it's certainly not
Right.
a systemic truth. And so when you look at something and go, this is that, simply add a little bit to that sentence by saying, this is that, yet it could be something else. And when you're able
Yeah.
to do that and see
Or
the
and.
world through, that
Mm,
lens, then
mm.
suddenly a lot of the binary problems start to fall away.
Go away. Yeah, yeah, totally. And, the other thing that I like to do there, well, actually, I'll come back with a book recommendation on top of yours. It's Barry Johnson, I think, wrote it. It's called Polarity Management.
Mm.
So that's a good one in this space, Barry Johnson. And then, also for people that are interested in it, I'm happy to share a little polarity map, a worked example on working with the continuum of innovation and stability. And so I'll just comment below if you're interested in grabbing a copy of that. And it's a worked
Right.
example of how to work with the continuum thinking of that polarity. And so, one of the things that I like to do with these polarities where they're really sticky is you put both of them into a quadrant matrix,
Mm.
just like you were talking about before with the four quadrants. And you look at the rewards of overfocus and the rewards of underfocus. And then you flip it around again, and you've got four dimensions on the two polarities. And so, what that encourages you to do is to see the elements of where your focus and intention and attention
Mm.
is going, and start to really shape up. Okay, rather than sitting purely on one side of the extremity, there's usually a nice melding of the solution, a blending of the solution that can get you to your continuum thinking. So happy to share that with folks if it's of interest.
Great. And then
Is there anything you'd like?
if we put a circle around
Mm,
that quadrant, around, we can
mm,
see that there's a bigger square around the smaller squares. And if we put a circle around that, we can start to see the paradoxical nature of there's no self without other, that other only
right.
exists in the face of self. So there's no left without right. There's no right without wrong. There's no black without white. And when we
Right.
start to see the world through that, we start to realize that it's all a continuum. There's no night without day.
Right. There's
And
no
it's hard to
love
get
without hate.
your head around at first, but being
It's
able
true.
to integrate those and seeing them as a circle, seeing them as a
Mm,
whole rather than
mm,
parts is the
mm.
movement.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Brilliant, Jay. Well, this sort of level of being and in the world is pretty rare, and so maybe this has gone a little bit over your head, and if it has, that's okay. It'll be psychoactive. It'll start to integrate over the next days and weeks and months. But like Jay said, if you're interested in having a chat with us about it, then feel
Mm.
free to just comment below or reach out on LinkedIn or Facebook, wherever you're at, and we've been more than happy to have a chat. So thanks again, Jay. A great discussion,
It was a
and look
great
forward
discussion,
to,
Andrew.
yeah, look forward to next week.